Hello, friends. Welcome to Lead to Gold, the podcast devoted to discussing all things growth and wellness. And I am so happy that you're here today. I apologize in advance if there is any thunder going on in the background while I'm recording this. I don't think it'll pick up, but I just looked out the window and a storm's a brewing. So that's fun. I also I feel the need to say, I just redid this room and we got a nice new couch, like from Crate and Barrel. She's nice. And I can finally record from the couch. I mean, I guess I always could have, but it wasn't comfortable to record from the couch. There was no purpose to doing that. But now I'm like, wait, I got this little nook. I got my blankets. My microphone cord reaches all the way from the desk. I'm going to record on the couch. So if the vibe's different, that might be why, because I'm cozy right now. And just before we get into all of the things for today's episode, I'll go ahead and give us the usual spiel. If you like what we talk about here, if you like this episode, the absolute best, most supportive, most helpful thing you could do would be to share it with a friend or rate it or both. Whatever podcast app you are currently using, go ahead and throw a rating on there if that's an option. And thank you so much for sharing it with somebody who you think would get something out of this. I want you to also know that Lead to Gold is not only a podcast, it's also a blog, which I've been running since 2021. And while I'm not currently on Substack, I do just have my own website where I post a new blog every other week. If you're following along with Lead to Gold, you're actually getting something from me every single Monday because I alternate between a blog post and a podcast episode. So that's all in the show notes. It's leadtogold.blog, super easy to remember. And I would love to see you over there too. We talk about all the same things, just in writing format. So it's more of what we like here. I also, if you're really down to just stay in touch with what's going on and you'd like a few extra little goodies, I also have a monthly newsletter that I send out, which you can very easily subscribe to on leadtogold.blog. It's at the bottom of every page. Just add your email and you're in. I only send them once a month. I send them at the beginning of every new astrological season with a cute little playlist. So if you're into that, you can get that by email. And that is all for now. Thank you so much. Just happy you're here, even if you don't do any of those things. Today's episode is one that I've had in my brain for a little while because I have felt definitely like the conversations we've been having have been a little heavy. And while that is part of the process, I think of the literal metaphor of lead to gold. You know, you got to get through the hard shit to get the good lessons out of it, to get the valuable thing out of it. I really do apply that to most areas of my life. Like, you got to get through the hard thing to get the real thing, the thing that you want, the thing that is beneficial, whatever it is. And all that being said, sometimes we're going to talk about tougher topics. Sometimes we're going to talk about things that don't really have a solution. And I do think that that's just part of life. I really am trying to keep it as realistic as possible over here. That being said, sometimes it's nice to lighten the load a little bit. And yeah, I just think we've been a little heavy. So I wanted to switch gears a bit there and chat about some reminders that have come up in my life at various stages when I was going through those really rough patches. And whether it is a true rock bottom or just a little bit of a funk, a hard time, all of the little, I'll call them mantras, I'll call them reminders. I don't really like the word affirmations, but you get what I'm saying. All of the ones that we're going to discuss today, I have a lot of context for, and I think could be applied in a lot of areas. So I really did just want to impart some things that helped me personally on this episode. And you know what? I actually really need it personally right now because I'm in a funk. I am going through it at this moment in time. I don't know really what it is or why, but I can definitely confidently say that the past week or two have just been extraordinarily rough, like frustrating. I just find myself pissed off at everything and everyone. It feels like nothing's going right. Pretty much feels like a retrograde when there isn't a retrograde. Maybe there is, and I'm just not astrologically smart enough to know that. But yeah, I'm having a tough time. The school year's ending soon. I know that this is always a time where things start to hit the fan and tensions are high and everyone's tired of each other. So I know that this is not a place that I've never been before. Like, this is familiar territory, but I don't know. Something about this year just feels particularly enraging. And I don't like that. I don't like being in this state. But I'm having a hard time, to be quite honest, getting myself out of it. I even went to the river on Monday. I literally wrote on an overlay on this reel that I posted, been a raging bitch all week, so I put myself in timeout, because that's exactly what it felt like. I'm like, I need to calm down. I need to stop exploding on everybody. So I need to go to the river. And I thought that would cure me. It definitely did temporarily. It felt very nice to literally like get in a body of water for the first time since November. But, you know, it wasn't a cure-all. I had to wake up the next day and go to work and deal with annoying kids. They're not all annoying, but a lot of them are. And then like more stuff at home. It's just endless. We don't need to get into the weeds. You know how it is when you're in a funk. You know how it is when everything and everyone pisses you off. So that's where we're at. And I don't like it. So this is not necessarily an episode to get myself out of that mode, because I know it's going to take a little bit more intentionality. But I at least hope that if you find yourself in a similar place at this moment, or if you find yourself just needing these reminders really at any point, you can always come back to this episode. I think that this could be helpful, not just for me, but for anyone who needs it. What I will say is this: in various points of my life, I think we can all relate to this. I have been so stuck in a certain pattern of thinking, in a certain belief, in just the way that I'm living my life day to day. And all it takes sometimes is just for somebody to say something in a way that it had never occurred to me, or in a way that I had just never considered. All it takes is a weird strand of words being placed together. And I know that that sounds kind of woo-woo or maybe like English teacher nerdy, but it's true. I think a lot of what I'm going to say today is not new. It's not revolutionary. It's not like nobody's ever said these things before. Maybe some of them you've quite literally heard verbatim before. But I want to talk about why that sometimes just is the thing that gets you shaken awake. Because every single one of these, whether it came from another person, most of them did, or it was just like a sudden thought that I had that had seemingly came out of nowhere. No matter where it stems from, I do strongly believe that there are these moments in our lives sometimes where we're just like, oh, synapses fire, new neural connections are being made. I never thought about it that way before, and now I have a brand new perspective on like a big part of my life. I don't know what that is for this particular funk that I'm in right now. I haven't gotten there yet. Maybe it'll come in the coming days. I hope so. But for now, I want to share with you 5 reminders that really got me out of whatever shit I was in. Hopefully they help you too. Number 5 is this. I'll say the phrase and then I'll give us all the context for where this came up and why it came up. So number 5. Would you talk to your best friend that way? That's the phrase. The context is this. I've actually written about this before on the blog. I'll post it in the show notes, but I had a period of time in probably 2021. It was early on in like me starting the blog, where I was just going through my days with such negative self-talk. And if you've been there, you probably can already relate to what I'm about to say. You don't really realize that you're doing it. It oftentimes just is a thing that you've done for so long that you kind of don't consider that there's another way that you could talk to yourself. And I can describe it as like, I'm quite literally going through my day being like, oh, I didn't get this done today. I suck. I didn't eat well today. I suck. Oh my God. Well, like I haven't worked out in 3 weeks. So that makes me suck even more. Like I'm just getting like lazier and fatter and like just an endless list of things that I was doing wrong and then calling myself out for in my brain. I'm not working hard enough. I'm not talking to my parents enough. I'm not visiting my boyfriend enough. I'm not going to the gym enough. I'm not eating well enough. Like everything was, I'm not doing enough, right? And luckily, I suppose at this time, I was also actively in therapy. And although I was going to therapy for more OCD, like exposure therapy, which was definitely working, I was kind of in the middle of this session with my therapist. And before I even got in the room, actually, like in the waiting room, I remember that day so vividly. I had just come from work and my head felt like it was buzzing. Like I could literally feel this weird fuzzy vibration going on in my head. And it's such a visceral thing that thankfully doesn't happen to me all that often. But if you know, you know, it's so unnerving. And it only really occurs to you after a full day of just being overstimulated and busy and stressed. And then you finally sit down in a quiet room and you're like, oh my God, like I feel terrible. So that's when it kind of occurred to me that I'm like, okay, something is kind of deeply wrong right now. So I brought it up once my therapist called me back, and I don't remember exactly what I said or how I explained it to her. But I told her basically what we just talked about, where I just was like, I just can't give myself a break. Like I do everything wrong. I'm not doing anything enough or well enough to be satisfied with it. And I just am so disappointed in myself. And whatever else I told her, I probably got very specific with it. And after a little while, she didn't stop me or interrupt me. She just says, would you talk to your best friend that way though? If you had a friend that confided in you that she felt like she wasn't doing well at her job or that she needed motivation to eat better or go to the gym more or whatever the situation is, would you tell her, well, yeah, you're not caring enough about your students. Well, yeah, you're not making great relationships. Yeah, no, of course you need to fix that. Yeah, of course you're not going to the gym enough. Like clearly. That's how I was talking to myself. And not only did I not have a problem with it, I quite literally didn't even really register that I was doing it. It's just a default, or it was. So when my therapist reframed it that way, like, okay, would you say the things that you are saying in your mind to yourself, to your best friend? That's when it clicked. I was like, oh my God, like, no, I would never, ever, 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 ever could not conceive of the possibility of talking to anyone I cared about in that way, ever. So I think it goes without saying, maybe some of us don't exactly feel this way, but I generally, even back then, thought of myself as somebody that I liked. Like I was like, yeah, I like myself. Like I'm doing all right. I'm cool. I'm fun. I'm hot. But I talk to myself like I am the scum of the earth, and that had never linked for me before. So I definitely think from that perspective change, first off, shook me awake, made me realize what I was doing. But then I was able to stop and pause and, if not immediately pay more attention to how I was talking to myself, just the awareness that I was doing that at all made a really big difference in how frequently it happened after that. Of course, the negative self-talk declined a lot. And I think even instead of what probably a lot of wellness coaches would say to do, which is in practice very hard to do, replacing negative self-talk with something positive, I don't think I ever really consciously switched out what I was saying for something more positive. But I really do think it was as simple as being aware that I was even doing that at all made the pattern break up a little bit. So do I still have negative self-talk? Yeah, absolutely. But is it as frequent? Is it as ceaseless? No. Hasn't been since we had that conversation. So if you're in that state right now, if you have a lot of negative self-talk, if you are extremely hard on yourself, whether internally or in conversation with other people, just think, would you talk to your best friend that way? Would you want your best friend to know that you would say things like that to them? Think about it that way. All right, number 4. This one, I just looked down at my notes. This one is a little silly, but it comes from quite literally my inner teenager, because this was a little bit of like a mantra that I used when I was a junior in high school. So I was probably 15, 16 when I came up with this, but it's very simple. You might laugh. It is make yourself proud. Okay. But I'm going to adapt this maybe slightly now that I am an almost 30-year-old woman. You know, half my life has gone by since then. I am honoring my inner child with this one because I think she was coming from a great place, a very, very helpful place, a very motivating place. And she was very motivated to do a lot of things, but also maybe slight misguidance that we can tweak a little bit. So let's talk about it. Make yourself proud. Okay. Quite literally, this came from a joint Tumblr account that actually Hydroxide and I had way back junior year of high school. It is not active anymore. Don't even go trying to find it because you won't find it. But back then we were both very motivated to get our fitness on. And even just talking about this makes me laugh because it's such a middle school, high school thing, I feel, to like really try to do. And it's also a very 2010s thing to try to do. But we had this whole Tumblr page for Fitspo, not for like Thinspo. Yeah, that was the original word. Not Thinspo by any stretch of the imagination, but more along the lines of like, okay, healthy habits, healthy eating, maybe a little bit of clean eating, whatever that means. Back then it was maybe had some problematic roots, but we were coming from a good place. And we were like, you know what? We're going to make this Tumblr page to motivate ourselves, to like keep each other accountable. And then we'll like meet up once a week or however many. It didn't even actually happen that often, but we would meet up and go to the gym together. So it was kind of wholesome. It was kind of silly, very high school. But I remember I would say that to myself in the middle of workouts when I was over it and ready to give up. And that was actually kind of the thing that I think some people like listen to really pumped up, amped up music to get themselves to like keep going through their reps. But that was what kept me going through my reps. That was what kept me doing the workout when I didn't want to do it anymore. Was I would literally just say to myself, like, make yourself proud. Make yourself proud. It was so silly, but it actually really worked. And I think about that now every so often, even though that was 15 years ago, in a slightly different way, where it's just like, I actually was listening to a Florence Given podcast episode about this the other day. She says it in a slightly different way, but I think it kind of comes from the same place where her little mantra is, no, I'm going to do this because I have to be better than everyone else. And she's being kind of sarcastic. I hope we gather that. I think a similar thing that I've been telling myself lately is it will work out because I'm insane. Everything is going to go my way because I'm insane. Similar energy to where this little mantra stemmed from, where it was created way back in high school. It was the thing that got me just past where I thought it could go. I really do think about it still to this day. And sometimes even just that little reminder, make yourself proud, or it will work out, it will get done, it will whatever, because I'm insane. If I tell myself that, I actually usually am a lot more motivated to finish the task, to see something through, to get to where I know I can get to. Even if it takes a little bit longer than I want it to, even if it's a little more stressful than I want it to be. But trust, if you know me, well, I should say, if you don't know me, you need to know that I am relentless in the pursuit of things that I want, sometimes to a fault. Like, I will actually drive myself a little bit insane. Maybe that's partially why I'm in the state that I am in currently, because there's just a lot happening and there's a lot that I'm trying to do. And I'm relentless. Like, I want this shit to happen. I want something to get done, and it will get done. I might spin my wheels out. I might go a little insane, but I'll be damned if it's not going to get done. So we might now be getting a little bit into like teetering on toxic motivation, but I think the sentiment comes from a good place when you are motivated, but starting to get to the point where you want to give up on something. Make yourself proud, do the thing, get it done, because you know you can, and you're going to feel so fucking good once you do. Okay. Number 3. This one is a 180 from the whole conversation we just had. Very, very different vibes here. But number 3 is this. No one really knows anything. Okay. I have to preface that this might make some people deeply uncomfortable. I have explained my thought process around this to people, and some have completely disagreed with me or have quite literally been like, ugh, I don't like that. I don't like thinking about that. So if that's you, I apologize. This just might not be the reminder for you, but for me and for also several people that I've talked to, this was deeply comforting. This was like a deeply helpful thing to remind ourselves of. No one really knows anything. Now, when I first had this thought, I genuinely remember, it's what I was talking about earlier, where it's like the synapse is fired. New neural networks. I had never really thought about this before, but it completely shifted my view of the entire world, the entire universe. Like, this was one of the things when I was younger that I was like, oh, I just became conscious, actually, I think is what happened there. I quite literally remember I was on the bus, and probably in middle school, maybe late elementary school, but probably in middle school, where I'm staring out the window. I was one of those kids with my iPod and my little headphones in, and I would just blast my music and stare out the window. That was every day. Like, everyone on the bus knew not to talk to me. I wasn't friends with anybody anyway, so I'm staring out the window. I'm thinking about things. I'm like in my own world, okay? And I don't really know what led me to think about this, but I do remember the exact moment where I realized, like, oh, no one really knows what they're talking about. Like, we don't really have definitive truth about anything because we are just little tiny humans on this little tiny rock in space. I know everybody always uses that and it's such a cliche, but it's true. How could we possibly know? How could we possibly like understand really anything? And I can already hear some people being like, oh, but like, why is that comforting? Why is that like helpful in any way? Because yeah, I also completely see how that thought process can be deeply unsettling, because in one way it kind of just means, okay, so aren't we all just like rambling around, like making shit up as we go? Yeah, I think we 1000% are. But the flip side to that is this, and I'm going to do my best to explain why this comforts me. Because the world could be very different, very easily, frankly. The world could be very, very different. We could, because we don't really understand the things that we think we understand. It just means, we have come up with definitions for things. We have come up with these social cues with how we live our lives. Different cultures do different things. It's all, yes, made up over time, but that gives us the freedom to change at any time. And it also implies that we have kind of all the time in the world to discover new things, to think about things differently. Like, I think the flip side to saying it in the way where nobody really knows anything is just the fact that quite literally anything is possible. Anything. Because we don't have a very deep understanding of how the world or the universe works, anything is possible. And to me, that is extremely exciting. It's exciting to me to think that the way that we currently live and operate, the way that our cultures and our societies work, doesn't have to be the only way they ever are. Even history, human history shows us that things do change, things evolve. And I still am very much of the belief that over time, things have drastically improved. Quality of life has drastically improved, far and beyond what one singular person can conceptualize. Yes, we have history books to tell us how things have improved, but we can't really understand the things that we haven't lived. We can't understand the things we haven't seen. And think about, maybe this is unsettling too, but it's okay. Just think about how many things you've never seen, you've never witnessed, you've never experienced, that you've never even heard of. Think about all of the things that you don't know. Like, I don't know. I just think that that's really exciting. And I think knowing that there is so much capacity for not improvement, but evolving, for discovering, for creating, there's so much room. There's so much room, and there's so much that we haven't done or figured out or tried or even conceptualized. And that's crazy. Like, that's so crazy to me. That's so existential, I know, but at least for me, deeply comforting. I hope it's deeply comforting for you too. If you're in a place right now where you feel like the world has gone to shit and like there's nothing that can be done, I do want you to just think about that phrasing maybe in a new light. We don't really know what we're doing, and we don't really know how things work, and we don't know what we don't know, and we don't understand what we haven't tried. That just means there is room to do something different, and that we have time and energy and space and freedom to do that. At any time, you could start right now. Quite literally, as small as you can possibly think of, like doing something you've never done before. Breathing in a way that you've never breathed before. Like, I don't know. I just think it's inspiring. It's exciting. Anyway, I'll get off my little existential high horse for this next one. Number 2 is I can only control what I do. When I think of, and when I thought of this episode in its entirety of like, okay, what are some of the like biggest life lessons, biggest takeaways, biggest things that I could talk about that have genuinely helped me or shifted me in some way? This was the first one that I thought of. I can only control what I do. because I am a control freak by nature. As I talked about just a few minutes ago, I am relentless. I want things done when I want them done. I want things to look a certain way. I want my life to go in a certain direction. And unfortunately, perhaps, though I've learned to not see it that way, that's not how life works. Yes, I am relentless. Yes, I think that can be a wonderful trait, but so much is out of my control. So much about your life is out of your control. And that's not something that I mean to be disempowering. I hope that's obvious. This is another uncomfortable truth, because if you spend your entire life, if you spend every waking minute trying to get things to work, trying to get the thing you want, trying to control everything, you're not going to be able to do it. It's not going to work. That's not possible. You can only control your actions, your thoughts, and your decisions. That's all you can do. You cannot control how other people respond to your actions or your decisions. You cannot control the weather. You cannot control capital the government, the capital G government. You cannot control the traffic on your morning commute. You cannot control even your own health in a lot of ways. You can't control whether or not you're going to get in an accident or whether or not you're going to get sick. Yes, sure, there are things that you can do in your life to prevent some of those things, but there is so much that you can't do anything about. So going through life, examining a little bit closer what is actually within your control to affect or change in any way is deeply beneficial and will save you a lot of mental energy. Like a lot. And honestly, now that I'm saying it in that way, this is probably a reminder that I need for myself right in this very moment. I knew we'd get here eventually. I do think about this still frequently. And I realized I didn't really give the context for where this one originated for me, but it was a little bit of a more like fuzzy time period. I just know that during, I'd say probably around the start of COVID, maybe a little bit before that, I was already going through a pretty deep like spiritual awakening, a shift of mindset, a shift of lifestyle. 2020 was crazy for so many other reasons besides COVID. But like for me personally, I was graduating college that year. I was living with my partner and his other male roommates, and it was a wonderful time. We were like all friends. We had a great time, but very different from how I was used to living. Work was weird, because I kind of couldn't work, but I was still doing Zoom stuff and I was still kind of teaching online, but being a student was kind of optional at that time. So everything was just weird. Okay. But I had a lot of time to go within, and I loved that process. I still think back on it as one of the most magical times of my life. Everything was just so internal. And I remember, I don't know if there was a particular situation that brought this realization to mind, but I think just in that process of changing so much so quickly, internal and external, there came a point where I realized like, okay, the world is chaotic. There are a lot of things that I want, and there are a lot of things that I wish that I could control, but I just can't. I can't. It's not possible. A lot of us out here have a really hard time with hearing the word no, with being told, no, you can't do that. No, that's not possible. No, that is not within your realm. No, that is not your responsibility. No, that is not something you need to worry about. No, we have a hard time. We don't like being shut down. We don't like thinking that there are things that we cannot do. But when I tell you that it is quite literally impossible to control anything outside of yourself, I mean it. You can't. You cannot. It is not possible. And sorry if I sound repetitive here, but that is quite literally how I had to talk myself through that realization, because I fought it so hard. I wanted to be able to control the safety of my older family members through COVID. I wanted to be able to control the decision of my now in-laws who refused to get vaccinated. I wanted to be able to control the outcry that was Black Lives Matter and the realization that racism is still very much alive and well in this country. Like, there's so much bigger than me, so much happening in places where I was not present, that I just wanted to be able to do something about. And still to this day, that desire is very, very deep within me. It still lives in me. And yet now I understand that truly I can only control what I do. Frustrating maybe, but less so when you start to think about, okay, well, I can have conversations with my in-laws. I can come from a place of love and a place of care. I don't have to fight them on their decision. There are decisions that we can make that either directly or indirectly contribute to the bigger things that we want to be able to control. Can we individually do anything about them? No, but we can make strides. We can join forces with other people that have similar goals. We can choose to go about our day-to-day slightly differently, to the point where we notice more of the positive things. Maybe we don't check the news as frequently. Maybe we don't keep up with the COVID death tolls every half hour of every single day. Maybe we take more walks. Maybe we call a friend who's on the other side of the country, who we're worried about, who we want to make sure is okay and safe. All of these were things that I had to just slightly tweak to realize that, no, I can't control everything. Yes, unfortunately, I can only control what I do, but that's not actually unfortunate. It's just true. And in our human capacity, we have to be okay with that. Now, I don't see it as a negative at all. Now, I don't see it as an unfortunate thing. I see it as a reminder to stop turning my wheels so damn hard on things that I can't do anything about. I will do my best to find ways that I can move the needle in the way that I want it to go, but I will stop trying to fight a system that is much, much, much bigger than me. So that's that. All right, guys, we're at number 1. This one has quite the backstory, but I'll get into it all as well. This is actually a similar timeline. A lot of these came from around that 2019 to 2021 period of time. This one's right in there with those. So number 1 is this. You don't need to be a good person. And when I say that, I'm saying it like, you don't need to be a, quote, good person, end quote. Think about what that means, a good person. What does it mean to be a good person? I'm sure we all have our own definition. I'm sure our Venn diagrams of what it takes to be a good person are pretty close to a circle, because there is a stereotype, right? There is an idea in our brains of what a good person does. And here's the context. I do think this was when I was seeing that same therapist, right around the very first reminder that we talked about, where I came home, and at that time I was still living with my parents. Living with them was very difficult for me because we were now at this point in time, I guess I should give a brief timeline. In and around 2020, I was living with my partner, now husband, and his roommates for some time. And then I would go home for some time, home being my parents' house. So I did not permanently live with my partner. That wasn't my address. That was where I was most of the time. Quite frankly, quite honestly, because I did not want to be living with my parents. I did not like being in the same house as my parents. That is not their fault at all. It's just that once you're finished with college, I'm sure several of us have experienced this, and you now have to go back to living with your parents if you're not immediately getting an apartment or a house outside of graduating, which I think most people nowadays don't have that luxury. It's very different, right? You don't have the same relationship with your parents as you did when you were 18 living at home, or 17, like when you were a child. Yes, obviously they are still your parents, but now it's your adult parents and you are an adult, and it's a bunch of adults at different stages of life living in a house together. And that's very difficult, I think, for a lot of people, because now I've grown up. Now I have my own way of living independently and doing things and taking care of things, doing my chores, how much time I spend out in the open in like a living room setting versus in my own space in my bedroom. And that doesn't necessarily align with how I used to be as a child. So I think it was a very reflective time, but it was also a very tumultuous time because it was COVID and it was political. And my parents and I don't exactly share the same political views. And we were very open and honest and loud about that. So it was just kind of a rough time. I say all of that to say, it got particularly rough later in 2021. At this point, I'm pretty sure I was already starting to make moves to actually fully move out because I didn't want to do it anymore. I was like, this is not sustainable. We're not getting along well, and I don't want to ruin my relationship with my parents. So we're making moves to get out of here because this isn't working. My parents and I, as I just said, were fighting a lot, sometimes over different things. My mom and I, at this time that I'm thinking of, had it particularly rough where, I mean, there were truly weeks at a time where I was just avoiding her. I wouldn't be in the house while I knew she was going to be up and around and awake. Like I would quite literally go from work to the gym and stay at the gym super late and then like piddle around or like go get food or do something just so I didn't have to be in the house at the same time because I didn't want to face her. I didn't want to have to argue. I didn't want to have to make amends. Like I did not want that. And that was hard on both of them. I know there are parts of me even now, like talking about it, that make me deeply sad. Like I wish that was not the reality, but at the time it was. And I remember sitting down with my dad, who has a special power of being able to make me cry because he just gets to the point. He gets the heartstrings. And we were having a conversation and I was already on the defensive because I didn't want him to, start an argument. But we just got to talking about like how hard it was and how living together was not going well. And I didn't like that. And I remember saying to him, I'm just trying to be a better person. Like I'm just trying to be a good person. So when we talk all this shit about politics and when I'm trying to get you all to understand like the mental struggles that I'm going through, why I'm in therapy, all of this stuff that we're not seeing eye to eye on, I'm just trying to be a good person. And he was like, well, you don't need to try. You're already great. And that got me. That got me immediately. Even thinking about it now, God, it's almost been like 5 years. I am about to cry right now thinking about that. And it just was something that I shifted on and sat with for a little while because I don't want to say like no one's ever said that to me before, but it just hit different. Like it felt very validating in a way, but also like I didn't believe him, which is sad. And I was surprised that he would say that when things had been so tumultuous. I don't know. It just was very like, oh, ooh, whoa. Okay. Thanks. Yeah, I don't know. I think that in hindsight, thinking about what it meant to me to be a good person was a lot of virtue signaling and a lot of maybe toxic self-improvement. Definitely a lot of self-optimization and like life optimization that wasn't realistic. And to just know that somebody that I was not currently getting along with, regardless of the fact that we weren't getting along and we weren't having an easy time communicating, for him to say, you're great. Like, you're perfect. You don't need to change in any way. You don't need to do anything. Just really reset a lot for me. And when I think about that moment 5 years later, 6 years later, I need to remind myself of that more. And I think we all do. Especially if I'm talking to the kind of person right now who is deeply self-critical and is very attached to the idea of being a, quote, good person. Or similarly, I think a lot of people are talking about this right now, having a good girl complex. Like if you think that you have to go through life living by the guidelines of what other people consider to be good, then you are failing yourself. And even deeper, I shouldn't even say you're failing yourself. You are ignoring yourself. I want you to hear when I say that. Like, you are ignoring yourself. The part of you that is real, the part of you that is like so deeply authentic. If you're trying to chase this ideal of what it means to be good, you cannot be your authentic self. Because that Venn diagram is probably two separate circles. Maybe not entirely, but I'm not saying we're not good people, but like, what does that even mean? I don't want to think even too much on it, but what does that really mean? There's a lot of ways to go with this thought process, and there's a lot of potential things to unpack here. So I feel like I just re-dropped a bomb on myself talking about it. I hope that this is making sense to you as we're talking about it. But something that I think ties in nicely to this thought of being a, quote, good person. This is almost like an extra bonus little reminder. It's not something that came to me in like a drastic moment of my life, but I think it is something that I've picked up along the way that fits nicely here, is that there are actually so few rules that we need to follow in order to be like a functioning part of society, in order to be a human that can interact with other humans. There's actually like so few rules. Obviously, we got to follow the law. Yeah, sure. Obviously, there are like these social cues that it's very weird if you like don't do. But what I mean when I say this is, here's a perfect example. Okay. You don't need to like fold your underwear when you take it out of the laundry. Have you ever thought about that? You don't need to fold your underwear. You don't need to match your socks. You don't need to do the dishes every night. You don't need to wash your face every night. All of these little things, I know I'm very in on like home tasks, but if I sat here long enough, I could give you 200 examples of things that you probably do every day that you don't really need to do, but you tell yourself you do because it's the normal thing to do, or the, quote, good thing to do. You don't need to do it. So when I kind of link these two things together, again, I think it's similar energy. There is just a lot that we kind of force upon ourselves that never really mattered. And nobody would really know or care if you weren't doing them. When I thought about this in the context of like, you don't need to fold your underwear and you don't need to match your socks, like quite literally, that was kind of where I got this idea in my head. I saw somebody say it somewhere. I stopped doing it. Instead of doing all of that, I got a bin, like a little cloth bin that I keep in my closet. And that's where my shirts go. That's where my bathing suits go. That's where my underwear goes. Like, it's not folded. It's just kind of thrown in a little drawer, in a little bin. And it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. I haven't lost any quality of life because I stopped folding my underwear. And that took me 30 minutes to do every 2 weeks. You know, I hope that just gives you a little fuel to your fire, that like there's probably a lot of things that you could reevaluate about the way that you're living or like the tasks that you're completing. That's just like, you know what? I don't need to do that. Oh, here's another one. I've seen this on Reels lately. You don't need to like do a workout under harsh fluorescent lighting in clear view of 50 strangers. You can just as easily throw on a YouTube video in your living room, light some candles, and listen to like nice soft music. I will say, personally, I don't think that would vibe with me, but if that vibes with you, guess what? You might have just found out the new best way to actually sustainably, consistently work out. If the gym is a struggle for you because of the publicity of it, is that the word I want to use? Because of the publicness of it, because of the harshness of it, if that's not your vibe, you don't have to do that. You don't have to do that. There's so many, again, this almost even goes back a little bit to like, nobody really knows anything. Like, there's so many things we haven't tried. There's so many possibilities for how we could be doing things differently. And that is collective and that is deeply personal, like we're talking about right now. So whatever idea of being good you have in your head right now, see what you can do about rejecting it, because it doesn't exist and it's probably keeping you in a really tight and trapped position. If you heavily subscribe to the idea of being good or needing to be better, I bet there are some things that you can evaluate about your life that you actually don't need to be doing. Because, like my dad said, you're already great. The fact that you care at all, the fact that you are trying so damn hard, means that you are already great. So, give yourself a break. Please. Please. I know I need to give myself a break because y'all heard me 5 minutes ago. That shit hit just as hard as it did 5 years ago when my dad said it. Give yourself a break. Give yourself some credit. Give yourself some grace, because you are doing just fine. Just fine. And if any of this helped you at all today, I do want to know, you don't have to compliment me, but I do want to know if any of this landed. I would love to know what insights or new perspective shifts you've had, any reminders, any mantras that have gotten you through your hardest times. I would love to know. What I think would be super fun, I don't know if this would work out, but I would love to be able to maybe even make a part 2 to this episode and share some of your all's takeaways or insights. Like, what were some of the things that got you through? So please share if you're willing. And I will share, two more things before we head out for today's episode. But because I'm ending on this note of like, I need a freaking break, I just want to share what the mini realization that I had today was, quite literally earlier today. I've been talking to my colleagues more or less candidly about just the state of mind that I've been in, this like deeply frustrated, deeply pissed off. I'm like 2 moments away from a crash out. The next less than nice thing anyone says to me, they're going to meet my hands. That's the energy. I decided on a whim today, I have free will. There are no rules. And I'm taking a fucking solo trip for a little bit. So I'm going to drive down the state a little bit this weekend. It's Memorial Day weekend. Maybe there were plans, but I don't care. I just like feel it in my bones, like deep in my bones, that I need to be alone and I need to reset and I need to just give myself a fucking break. So I'm going to go stay in this cute little inn, and it's going to be rainy and chillier all weekend, which is actually very welcome because it has been stupid hot the past couple of days. So yeah, we're just going to go sit in this little inn and read and journal. And maybe I'll walk over to a coffee shop and read and journal there. And I don't really know what else I'm going to get into, but I don't need to give myself more shit to do. Like, I think I need to just very, very much do less right now. So that's what we're going to do. And by the time you hear this, I will already be back and will be interviewing the next podcast guest that we're going to have, which will come out in 2 more weeks. So I'm super duper excited for that. It's going to be great. I always love having a guest. But before we get there, let's just finish off this episode with our usual ritual of we're not really strangers. I think for this episode, I want to switch over to the forgiveness edition because along with all of these little reminders that we've talked about today, I do think there's a level of forgiveness work that can be done, because when we come to a moment like this in life where we have a sudden realization, or we're like, holy shit, like I've been living my whole life in this way that was not beneficial to me, not helpful to me, actually quite harmful to me. I could have been living this way, XYZ. Even though we now are kind of set on the quote unquote right path, or like we have a new fresh perspective and we're feeling really good, I do think there's always a little bit of guilt for why didn't I do this sooner? Why didn't I think of this sooner? I wish that I hadn't wasted so much time thinking or living in this other way. Yes, that very much happens. But again, there's kind of nothing we can do about it. Like, now we know, and now we can move on. So again, a little self-forgiveness, I think, never hurt anybody. And let's see what little mini conversation we can get into regarding that. Okay, here it is. What's the hardest thing you've had to forgive yourself or someone else for? Whoa, that's a deep one. That's a deep one at the end of a deep episode. But let's see. I do remember writing, not a blog post, this was more of like a personal diary situation, probably when I was like 19, about the idea of forgiveness. And I think it's a little fuzzy to me now, but I remember like making a really big deal about it back then to myself. This was a very like internal process. But I think I had just never really fully understood the concept of forgiveness before. And in this journal, I just remember going through the process of forgiving everyone who I was hurt by, or in one way or another, like didn't understand why they made certain decisions that they did. And a big one there was my mom. Like, that was a really big forgiveness piece for me. And honestly, like, to be completely honest, I wrote that when I was 19. I'm 29 now, and I do still think I'm doing a little bit of that work. Here's the thing. My mom and I have grown together so much since I moved out of living with them, since I have been like an adult functionally on my own, and especially since my wedding. I don't know that I've ever talked about it on the blog or a podcast. I don't think I have, but I think our relationship was so repaired by the process of me getting married, which I feel so lucky to be able to say, because I think most people have the opposite experience where working with their mom or parents in planning a wedding is like the most stressful part of the planning. But she was just so willing to help in any way, like financial, but also just like anything that I needed support with, anything that I needed to just have a sounding board for. Not only was she available, she was on it. She wanted to be part of it. And I'm so grateful to, I'm like going to get emotional again. I'm like so grateful to have had her through that process, because again, like I just know how rare that is. And yeah, my mom and I have been through a lot. We had it rough when I was younger. I'm feisty, she's feisty. We're both really stubborn, and we are very good at like yelling at each other. Still are, but I just think that there was a really long time of that where, I don't know, I just didn't think our relationship was ever going to be where it is now. And I mourned, even like as a teenager, I mourned the eventual mending that I knew a lot of women did go through with their moms, where it's like, oh, by the time you're 21, your mom's going to be your best friend. And I remember hearing that and not believing it, which was so sad to me. But here I am at 29, and I'm like, yeah. I don't know if I'd call her my best friend, but she wouldn't want me to call her best friend. We're like a very good mother-daughter duo, I think, at this point. Like, we have gone through a lot, and we have gotten through a lot together. And I think our relationship is the best it's ever been. So I'm very grateful for that. I realized I didn't maybe fully answer the question, but I, all to say, have gone through that process for a long time. And I think in that there was a lot of self-forgiveness too, of just like, okay, yeah, I definitely treated her like shit. I know better now, and I want to be better. But gotta give myself grace. And I gotta tell you that you gotta give yourself grace. And I also got to tell you, thank you so much for listening to this episode. This was definitely a little different than how we do some of these. Definitely feels like different vibes, because as I said at the very beginning, I've been sitting on my couch this whole time, and I am comfy cozy, and I'm also clearly a little bit in my feels. So I hope that this was therapeutic for all of us. And I also hope to see you back here in 2 more weeks, where we will have yet another guest on the show who I cannot wait to introduce you to. And if you want a little more, even a little bit sooner, get on it, because I've got a blog post next week, so you can go check that out. All right. I love you so much, and we will talk soon. Bye.